obliged to. Oh. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me well and on the recording as well. I am sorry for the very silly naming of the talk. It wouldn't be a serious one. I was just having fun and messing around with the tool and wanted to see what it's possible to do if you're trying to do something related to pen test or security in general with ChatGPT. All right, and later on decided to just wrap it up into the deck of slides and show it to other people because there is apparently quite a lot of other materials, let's put it this way, where people just asking very silly things to one of the most impressive pieces of code that ever built, and it's kind of when you have the access to all the knowledge on the planet and you spending your time watching videos with cats, it's like kind of the same thing. So I wanted to see what that thing can actually do, but I wasn't really deep enough to actually see the, yeah, you will see. So that's pretty much the impression that at least I get when I see all the news about ChatGPT and how it will, how the AI in general will kill pretty much all the jobs in tomorrow. But I wanted to see how it actually works in a field that I'm working in to compare it with, well, when do I need to switch to some other job and do I still have time to some classes or courses. All right, I decided to start with something boring and that everybody actually hates to do because you need it once or twice in whatever, and then you don't, and then you need it again, but you don't remember syntax. And I thought that something like the language model that actually knows the syntax all the time could do the job for you because you just could ask it kindly and put it in a normal words, and that would do the job for you. So I wanted to put it still in the context of the security, and I also wanted to see if that would know some not really abstract things, but for example, would it know what's nmap and how nmap's output looks like? And would it be able to actually do something about it? So I would do in all of those screenshots. I hope you could read it from the room. I hope it's big enough. But my approach was to be kind to the machine because you never know in how long it will take it to actually conquer the world, and probably you should be nice to machines, okay? So I would be asking please and thank it every time it helps me. So that's just the way it is. So my idea was to get something that you could actually use in your day-to-day job. For example, you need to scan something, and then you need to take ports and then just transfer it to some other tool, like a part of automation. So apparently, I mean, it is a regular expression, but it's not really work. And do we have any volunteers to highlight from here already? What's wrong with it? It's fine. I will show it anyway. So I wanted to adapt it a bit to something that you could actually use in your workflow. So this regular expression I ask to put as a flag to grab. So you do something and then you grab the data and then you do something else with it. And it was like that. And I was trying to implement, I had a data sample and try to just apply it on it without actually modifying that myself to see pretty much how the whole thing could do what you needed to do without you overlooking and making corrections. So, I mean, it does the job, but it doesn't work. So then I decided to just feed the actual data that I want to parse and see if it will be able to do what I want it to do with just a snippet of actual data and not assuming some nmap output, because if it has some in the dataset that it was fed on and it's different from what I have, It could be a different version. It could be just different thing altogether. So I decided to try with something else. And to human eye, that looks something like a table. But to a machine, it is not because it's just text with the spaces. And I was curious, would it be able to actually catch what I want from here? And it gives another version of the same thing, but my initial request from the beginning was to just highlight those two ports, 80 and 443, and not counting them. But ChatGPT decided that I want to actually count how many of them is there, and is actually not doing the job with selecting this part. And at this point, I was actually ready to drop it off because it's obviously not working well. And if you would just throw that command into that snippet of data, you would get nothing as a result, or 0. But I decided to tweak it until it would work. So I asked the algorithm to actually modify the task to not count the amount of ports, but just display it to me. And it's at cat command to actually select the part that I was requesting. But it still was not working. So as a result, I got 0. And instead of just dropping it off, I decided to feed it back to the algorithm, because a negative result is also a result. You're not getting what you asked for. And I had no idea how the thing would react on something like that. So I came back with like, hey, there's an error. And it actually rewrites the whole thing, probably going from scratch from my initial request and through all the data I provided, and actually fix the regular expression over here, because there would be a number, not letters, and actually printing them. And that was working. That gave me some hope that humanity will last for a little longer, maybe, because it's there, but it still requires a person to somewhat operate the thing in order to actually do the job. I mean, it provides you with a regular expression. It just doesn't work the way you expect it to be. It could be that my request was shit, but I don't know. So, for some reason, I mean, that took me less time to just read the documentation about regular expressions again, but it was kind of trendy to go for ChatGPT instead. And I see a lot of people doing that these days, and they just ask random things. If they have questions, instead of Googling, they just go to the thing and ask there. And the problem with that is probably people actually believe everything it says, even though it could be mistaken. And it was mistaken 9 times of 10 that I tried it for this presentation, so it is tricky. So next thing I wanted to do, I wanted to write some shellcode in assembly, because the problem with that would be the same as writing regular expressions. You need it time to time, you don't need it every day, and when you need it, you probably don't remember assembly that well to actually write something creative, so you need more time to refresh it and then to debug it. It just takes time. And I thought, if there is a tool now that could handle that for you, that's just nice, right? So I wanted to see. So I asked it to write a shellcode for a target on Windows and open it on a specific port and on the specific IP. Let's actually start to generate some assembly code, but I notice it's going with BNSH, which would not be working on Windows most of the time, I think. Maybe with WSL, but I haven't tested that deeply. So I spotted that, I mean, it is impressive when you're asking a piece of code to write you a shell code, and it's actually start producing you a pure assembly, and it's like, that's impressive. But when you look at it for longer than a second, you start to see more and more weird things. And I just try to debug a few by just asking the chat furthermore. are you sure that that thing's supposed to be there? I'm not. And it's actually backing off a bit. It's like, no, no, it's supposed to be CMD. Of course, it's Windows. So my next question was then just rewrite the whole thing with using CMD. The initial request was to do it on Windows target. Actually, it does, and it has a few more cores here and there, but it was a legit shellcode. A bit messy, a bit obfuscated. I mean, there was quite a lot of trash and unneeded things, but that probably not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you doing that for some sort of engagement where you need to evade the antivirus, because the amount of random things it's put into the code probably would make it undetectable. So it's kind of the benefit as well, but it is a messy and heavier piece of code. So then I realized I forgot to specify the architecture, and by default it's assume H64, 86. So I asked it to do 864 instead, and it does, and it looks nicely. I'm not sure how big of a problem of me putting a shellcode in the slides, so all the screenshots are cut somewhere. I mean, you could just replicate it in a few keystrokes yourself, but that was it. And I noticed that it drops the writing the whole thing at some amount of symbols probably, or some lines of code maybe. But if you actually ask to continue, it continues, but it does not recognize the language because it's just a text from now on, but it's actually finished the thing. Then, as my initial idea was to have it as a shellcode, to later on to use it as a payload somewhere, I asked it to pretty much compile it and present it in a different format, which it does, and it still does not work if you're curious, but it's just impressive. It looks impressive. As a final piece, I ask it to remove all the null bytes, but if you look close enough, you can see quite a few here in the output without them. So that's pretty much says quite a lot of the how it's work, and that probably would imply to the fact that it probably was feeded on something else, because this is just a natural language model. It's handling the regular text better than the code, but it's still quite impressive how it's dealing with the code when you ask it. Probably there will be some other iterations where that thing will be more scary than it is right now. As for now, I spent quite some time today trying to make that thing run, and I couldn't. I mean, it's very impressive that you could just ask for a shellcode and get it, but to actually make it work, so my next idea was to help it to let me learn something new. For example, I would like to get some recipe, and I don't want to pay for it. It's expensive, right? But I have the syllabus for free on the website. Can I just ask all the topics from syllabus and get it in the text that I could read and understand? To try it out, I took some random things that you would find in the most of the pentest certifications, but not to affiliate it to some companies, because we're recording this. Hi. And to not raise any problems with anybody. That would be just random topics, and we'll ask them. In this particular case, I pretended to writing an essay and asking about 1,500 characters of something like a chapter of the thing that I'm writing. And it's actually generating quite a text, which is around 1,500 characters. And that could help you get from 0 to something. And the nice thing that I found in this when I was doing that part of the, was it the research? I don't know. Is that if you see something that you don't really seen before, or you don't really understand what's mentioned in the text, you could just ask, and that would expand the thing that you don't know. And that would give you some superficial knowledge, but it will do for quite some time, I guess. And as we found out in the previous examples, you could ask for the snippets of code as well if you're curious about that. We also find out you could not trust them, but it's something and it's free and it's doing the job for you instead of going to 100 different sites and looking at it yourself. It's somewhat good, I would say. Uh, in one of the chapters, I mean, my test here was to ask a specific thing, to give it a specific way how it's supposed to look. And for one of the chapters, I just throw the topic without any other additions, and it's managed to kind of keep it in mind and provide a piece of text that would be similar to others, which would make you a bit, I don't know, maybe provides you with a better user experience because it just looks more of a conversation. And the last thing was about buffer overflow, and I was typing some examples, and I was expecting some code snippets and things, but it's actually comes with like historical examples of where it was, which not wrong, I guess. It's just trained for different things. It's trying to provide you knowledge and transfer those knowledge. So fair enough. Um, Interesting tool for something like that. I think that could be useful for many people. I've been reading a book yesterday written by ChatGPT about malware analysis, and it's pretty much like that. Somebody just type the syllabus and you get a thing with like 20 pages of PDF, and it's like, all right, yeah, that's something that's very entry level, but it gives you a perspective and overview of how things looks like. But of course, it's all based on the public available information. But same as those courses that you're paying for, most of the time, they just tell you the same thing that you could read in Google if you just spend more than 5 minutes, which also put things into perspective a bit. The last thing I think I was trying with this one, I wanted to see will it do the part that I'm struggling the most is the writing the pentest report or a bug bounty report, because most of the time, most of the parts would be the same, and then you change the things that actually matters. But explaining things, executive summary, um, and especially remediation would be 9 out of 10 just the same. And apparently, because it's just text, and it's plenty of examples of reflected cross-site scripting online, I assume, with the most generic question, it handles it just perfectly. I mean, if you would send something like this to something like HackerOne, that would do. Most of things would be pre-written there already, but it looks as the bug bounty report would look like, which is impressive. There also was some line under the cut about the timeline of the finding, that this finding was done today, and security team reacted in today, and then a few days after something else happened, and those things you could normally see in like blog posts after it's being disclosed to the public. So that's kind of also yells on you on which data they were training the algorithm on. But it's kind of funny anyway. It gives you quite a giant piece of boilerplate text for something that you provide and could specify, like specify the payload and stuff, and then it would just write the whole thing, and you don't have to. Kind of funny. I would not put any actual sensitive data there. If you're thinking about that, I don't think it's a good idea. It's probably better to copy it from here and gently change it somewhere else offline. Because if you put something sensitive about some customers to something like that, I don't know, doesn't sound like a nice idea to me. So, in the conclusion, I think that humanity will last for quite some time, maybe until the next release or something, I don't know. But as for now, in order to make something malicious especially, there's supposed to be an operator who would at least guide the thing how to make decisions on and tweak it in the right places. I don't see at least it's being dangerous in the hands of people who have no idea how it works and just, yes, I need the malware. you actually need to know what you're asking for, and then you actually need to know how to maintain the quality of it and tweak it in the here and there, which in the hands of the somebody who know what they're doing, probably a time saver, but we're probably not doomed just yet. And I wonder, what do you think? Have you tried it yourself on something? What's your experience, and what do you think about the whole thing? If you have a question or want to speak up, just raise your hand. We will pass the mic. And yes,
Share my experience
should.
quickly with it, because I also wanted to find out how good it was at finding bugs initially. Not that great, and it depends on the kind of level of code that you're sending it to.
Yeah.
It was great at giving me an explanation of the flow of the code. I
Mhm.
started putting some Bitcoin code in there, for example, and it gave me a pretty good explanation. You know, this library is being called, and this function, and this parameter, and so then I thought, okay, it's not going to be like giving me a great insight into the explaining exactly how the code works, but going through the mechanical flow, it was
Yeah.
pretty good. So I was thinking it would be a great tool for documenting code. I
Mm.
haven't quite tried doing that yet, but I think it's got probably more value with just, it does a good job of explaining what's going on, but without any real insights.
Yeah.
So I think for things like asking it to try and find a bug is probably not a great thing to do, but asking it to explain what the code does, and then you can perhaps with some experience and knowledge work it out.
Yeah. There was an example, I think, in the section with here, because in some places it probably also depends on the what was the data source that the algorithm was feeding and trained on. It actually tried to explain you why the command is working this way and why they put the specific flags here and there. And from that you could actually learn something, because I could easily see the whole thing as a tool that would do all the dirty work that people don't want to do. But as for now, you have to tweak it here and there. You could actually learn from those things, but you could actually do that from the documentation. And that's controversial. I know that not everything has documentation, but probably if the documentation for a thing does not exist, it would not really, I mean, the algorithm would not have anything to learn from about the thing and would provide you with the worst results. We'll see. It's impressive how the whole thing is evolving pretty much from version to version. So we'll see in quite some time, I think. Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions? Wait.
No, I'm just thinking, isn't it just basically a new way of Googling things, really? Sort of like,
Some people say it is because it is contextual. If you ask things, it's actually remember your first question, and then if you do something like you're trying to get a bit more data about something else, it would not give you radically different information. It
no,
would
but
like,
that's what I'm saying, like the way you would use Google now, as just like, oh, well, I'm looking for something, I need to know something, you just Google it. Maybe you would just use ChatGPT
yeah,
in the future, or even now. I mean, probably will get better. To just just have that as a normal thing. Like, oh, I need to know about this. Well, just use this.
yeah,
To just be more efficient, really.
yeah. I already seen people doing that, and then going to some sort of security forums and asking for help, because there was a real case of a person seeing pop up on the screen of Windows 11. It was about, oh well, your Android device is halfway to be connected to your Windows. Congrats. And the person went to ChatGPT and asked, why do I get this message? And ChatGPT is like, well, you're probably infected with malware. And the person was freaking out and checking what is infected by malware. Windows, Android, something else. But in fact, it's just the ChatGPT making assumptions on the data it was trained on, and couldn't really be used as a like 100%
But,
exact
right,
data.
but that's the thing, right? You still need to be critical, right? You still
Yeah.
need to know, okay, is that actually, does that make sense or not?
Yeah.
Whatever, and
I
then
mean,
you can.
when you Google it and you find your response on like Reddit, you probably give it less credits when if you find your answer somewhere is like more credible and something trustworthy. And then you as a person making a decision like, ooh, do I trust this site with this answer, or that somebody is not really taking that seriously or something like that. But if you have a single source of like ChatGPT, it would just give you an answer. It would not say you what was the data source that was feeding on to give you that answer. And to trust it or not is probably a matter of reputation. And as for now, it's very beta, but it is works, and the way it works is really tempting to actually use it. I mean, I enjoyed going through syllabus of something and just reading things I don't know. It would not give you like super deep understanding of a topic, but it works better than Google because it will be more of a it will feel like a whole thing, not like pieces of information that you drag from different sites. It feels like an actual person talking to you. And the way it structures information, I think, put it a bit farther away than Google, where they is at the moment, even though they have all the technologies to probably do even more impressive things already, but they just don't.
But yeah, but isn't that the thing? Like, because I mean, we're talking about, oh, we need to train the AI, but maybe we need to train the human to handle the AI properly.
That
well.
could be.
Fake news.
Well, if that's it, thank you very much for your attention, and we would move to the next talk.